Welcome to Building Research Relevance. My name is Stephen Shaw. I'm the chair of the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology at McGill University. And what we're going to talk in this episode of Building Research Relevance is about how to build structures. This is important. We complain a lot, and I'm a huge fan of complaining. I do it all the time. And it's easy to point out what flaws exist in a current system. And it's easy to throw up our hands and say, well, that's horrible. We're not problem identifying so that we can solve the problem, but rather than just identify the problem, we're kind of problem admiring. Just saying, oh, look how terrible things are. The world is terrible. We have terrible research. We have no way to do it. We have profiteers running our journals. The free labor of reviewers and authors is horrible. There's no way around it. The academic incentive structures are so horrible that we're now become like a business where we just produce widgets rather than anything formal or anything scientifically useful. It's easy to talk about that. I'm very impressed with the Open Science Forum and that massive website that provides a lot of building of structures to be in place. These are great. I think that the repository of papers for managing preprints is wonderful. I think that's a real positive thing. Data repositories, like say Open Science Forum has them, and there's other repositories out there. Building of registered reports and building the capacity for journals to actually have these pre-registered components in their types of papers that they accept are very, very useful. These are examples of building structures. This is what we need to do. A couple of things I would just like to emphasize is that as I've learned more and more about where we are with science, how can we make it better? And I'm not the philosopher of science or really that great of a scientist in general. I'm a clinician. I've been one for a long time, and I train people how to be clinicians as a psychologist. But this is where I realized that research needs to be relevant, or else the children and adolescents and families that we serve are going to receive services that are not particularly good. So this has really spurred me on to get involved in this science reform process, where things like reproduction and reproducibility and constantly having replications out there serves a lot of good. But what I thought I'd just mention is a few of the structures that I'm thinking of working on, or that I'd like to work on, and I probably will this summer. I still have a few months left of being department chair, which sucks up a ridiculous amount of time and energy. But I am kind of making plans to build my own structures to help along this idea of research reform, and especially research reform in the guise of making research more relevant. I do have some implementation models out there that I'm actually working on writing up as we speak. Implementation has become a real legitimate science. It's something that came out of, to a large degree, public health, but I think building better implementation models are helpful. And so I'll be continuing to write and communicate about that. Write and communicate about the value of registered reports. Again, these are not answers to all the problems, but it's really helpful. Helping to build on theory building expectations for students and how we train students in theory building. Asking the right questions and how to answer those questions is a much better approach to research methodology than the infinite variations of analysis of variance and infinite variations of regression. We don't really have to teach people Mankovas because, for the most part, those are fishing expeditions. And to me, it's like the big warning sign that BS is coming when I see a Mankova. Not that it's all bad. It's a good tool, but it's a tool with very minimal uses. So helping to improve training and helping to improve theory building as part of research methods, as well as just like design, just like analysis and statistical modeling. Learn how to theory build and ask questions as part of that too. So I'm working on that. next part I'm working on that I'm kind of excited about. Actually, I don't know how to do it, so I'm still working on this, but we'll get back to you as I finish this series. We'll work on some more complex series as we go. But one of those is storytelling and communication. We're really lucky because here in Canada, we have the Social Science Humanities Research Council, which is our big federal funding agency that many of my students are funded through. And some of us have research grants through that organization. But SHRC, as it's known, also has some very interesting ideas, including things like 3-minute storytelling competitions and other storytelling mechanisms in there. And you'd think, oh, storytelling, that's from maybe literature or philosophy or things like that. But not really. Actually, quite a few people who win those awards for storytelling are actually scientists. And what you find is that they're so good at telling the short story. And what the problem right now is there's a bit of a disconnect. People are very good at storytelling and they can orally communicate a story in a very short time concerning their research. However, when you read the research, there's no storytelling components to it. It's much easier if we build a narrative around research data with a beginning, middle, and end. And that narrative should be interesting and useful and valuable. We need to incorporate many elements of storytelling from literature and fiction. This is why it's such an important component of this, because this is how we're going to communicate. So one of my big structures that I'd like to build is to train students in storytelling. And this is something I think is going to be valuable. It also helps the students because now I would like it to be so they can explain to their parents what kind of research they're doing in a very compelling way. The second structure I'm building, and this is one that I've talked about before, but I'm going to continue with it, and that's building research consortium. This type of structure is one of the most valuable ones we have because testing any research now and communicating it effectively requires a lot of people. This idea of a solo scientist out there really testing hypotheses and testing research questions and building theory, it's almost impossible. Things are too complex. There's too much of a foundation of literature out there that has to be integrated. Yes, a single person could come up with a great idea by their own. Solo work is perfect for that. But to test that idea and to test the relevance of the idea and to make it go from an idea to a truly relevant component requires a team. And so building big teams are what I'm really interested in doing. Just to let you know, one of the things I plan on doing with this big team science is making sure that we have a variety of methodologies out there. So we do have good qualitative researchers. We do have good exploratory researchers. We do have good survey developers. These are important components. It's unrealistic to have every single person do every single thing. So let's bring in expertise in a variety of ways to make big team science able to answer a lot of questions. We can answer a lot of different questions because we have a lot of different methodological expertise. So I'm strongly recommending consortia as an important way to, one, be efficient. Two, it's always a good mechanism to get funding. People are more likely to fund these big team science than individual and solo efforts. And three, it helps us create better, higher powered, more efficient studies. So that's one. And by the way, more inclusive studies too, because if we collect data in multiple places with multiple populations, chances are we'll have a more relevant research for a more diverse group. And then the third part of the structure that I really like to be building, and I'm still thinking this through, so this is my speculative session today, but the thing I'd like to check through is whether we can create a form of a journal where we have a checklist of forensic meta-science tools that every study goes through before publication. In this, we would have to certainly pay reviewers to do this, but hopefully we can come up with an automatized idea where we can check for the primary failings that tend to show problematic data, whether it's a GRIM approach or whether it's some other mechanism to find problems with analyses and problems with data. If we check automatically before that, before publication, and then we can publish it. And so, in other words, use the tools of forensic meta-science not to find fraud. I mean, that's fine. If we find fraud, that's fantastic. But not really the goal. The goal is to increase credibility and increase relevance. So if we created something like an online journal with a data repository attached to it, where people are required to actually provide their data for publication, but that it goes through a series of checks. And if we can do it automatically, that can at least eliminate some of the ideas. And I know you're thinking, well, shouldn't a journal do that already? Sure. Should is not helpful. Fact is, people don't. There's not a consistent mechanism for reviewers to go through and do several tests to ensure that the data are at least without obvious problematic areas in terms of reporting, whether it's fraud or problems, or whether it's simply typos and errors. So in other words, use those tools in advance in the pre-publication review and set up a system like that. I'm looking into that. I'm working with some librarians on that, as well as some of the people who do the forensic meta-science. But I'm not really interested in finding fraud. What I am interested in is increasing the credibility of our work, increasing the relevance of our work. And a journal that checks articles in advance has a lot of opportunities to really build credibility, build transparency, and take open science to a new level. And that's kind of one of the things I'm planning on working on over the next few years. So the idea here overall is that we need to build structures. Open Science Forum, registered reports. There's some journals out there that are being developed that tend to really emphasize replication studies. I'm not sure that's going to make too much of a difference, but it does make some difference. And some difference is pretty good. I think we have enough different mechanisms out there, enough different structures out there, that science is having a wonderful reform. And I know people are real negative about science right now, about where's the future of science going to be as funding is being just chainsawed to death right now with no real value other than destruction. But as we're seeing this happen, it's easy to lose faith in what we're doing. It's easy to become cynical. To me, the only mechanism by which we can avoid cynicism right now is to build new structures, build more efficient, better structures for better science. Yeah, it's going to be hard. I'm not naive to this. But honestly, it's the only thing that keeps you going right now is to build new structures. Try to find new funding models. We're working heavily on that, trying to find new ways to fund students, because it appears that federal grants from the U.S. and Canada are being reduced dramatically. So let's build new structures. We'll talk a little bit about new funding structures probably in a future episode. But for building research relevance, build structures. And this is especially for those of you who are editors or associate editors of journals. Finding better ways and more efficient ways to review papers is a wonderful way to build a new structure. But for me, working on communication and storytelling, working on training issues and helping theory building become primary emphasis, big team science, so we have consortium. I just kind of like calling it big team science, but we've always called them research consortia. But building teams to work on processes to become more efficient, and a potential journal with forensic meta-science checks prior to publication with a required data to be deposited, really have potential to build a credible, structured system to make open science and to make relevant research something that's more than just something we talk about or complain about where things are going bad. We're actually building structures. So thanks very much. Have a great day. And I will be back for some more detailed work on how we can build research relevance. Thank you very much.